And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I got my first deck tech from Battle for Baldur's Gate, and it's going to be Gluntch the Bestower. 1 green and a white jellyfish 05 with flying. At the beginning of your end step, choose a player. They put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature they control. Choose a second player to draw a card, then choose a third player to create 2 treasure tokens. And when I first talked about this card, I thought it was a little difficult to build around because you don't have any choice in giving stuff away, right? If you want to make a hug deck, great commander for that. But I actually want to build around this, actually trying to win. And that's the strategy I'm going for. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, okay, there are some interesting ways that you can go with this for sure. Now, it is going to be super difficult not to benefit your opponents at all here because you are giving your opponent stuff no matter what. 3 players have to be chosen here. One of them's going to be you for sure. The other 2 are going to be your opponents, obviously. But I tried to minimize the benefit that we're giving to our opponent as well as maximizing the benefit to ourselves. And depending on the cards we have and what we're doing, that's obviously what we're going to choose for our commander's ability, right? That's what I really like about it is at the beginning of our end step, we get to choose, okay, do we want the counters? Do we want the tokens? Do we want to maybe give our opponents the tokens for whatever reason? You could also play a politics game big time here, right? You can let your opponent draw if they promise not to attack you next turn, stuff like that. So that is another advantage here. But I really do want to take advantage of our commander's abilities as much as possible. And one of the cards I mentioned in that video was Generous Patron, which of course is an auto include here, right? 2 and a green, Elf Advisor, 1/4. When it enters the battlefield, support 2, which means you put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target creatures. And whenever you put 1 or more counters on a creature you don't control, draw a card. So if we choose a player to put counters on their creatures, they're going to put those counters on. We're at least going to get a card draw off of it. I actually really like Generous Patron just in general because you can play it for 3 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on 2 creatures that your opponents control that really aren't that good. They're never going to attack with them anyway, and you get to draw 2 cards. So that's pretty decent. Nils Discipline Enforcer, of course, is going to fit here as well. 2 and a white human cleric 2/2. Being your end step, for each player, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature that player controls. So obviously that works great with the Generous Patron, but also each creature with 1 or more counters on it can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless its controller pays X, where X is the number of counters on that creature. So obviously, if our opponents are putting counters on their creatures, it's going to make it a lot harder for them to attack us. Another thing we can do is goad our opponent's creatures with cards like Bloodthirsty Blade and Martial Impetus. So now, if our opponent chooses to put a couple of counters, because they get to choose the creature that gets them, they put a couple of counters on their big flying creature, we can now goad it so it can't attack us, right? We want to make sure we do have some goad effects in here or some way to keep their creature from attacking us if it gets out of hand. Another thing we could do is throw in effects like Intrepid Hero, 2 and a white human soldier 1/1. Tap, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. A really funny way to use this is your opponent has a creature in play. Let's say it's their commander, 1 creature, and it's a 2/2. We can choose them to put counters on their creature. They have to because there's no other creature in play, and their commander now becomes a 4/4 and we get to kill it with Intrepid Hero, right? Another way is we just have this in play and it sort of prevents our opponents from getting really big creatures, right? If they see we have the Intrepid Hero, they're not going to want to make their creatures bigger because then we can just kill them, right? So having effects like this in here as well is going to be great. There's some great cards from New Capenna that fit here, like Angelic Sleuth, 2 and a white, Angel Advisor 2/3 with flying. Whenever another permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, investigate. So now we want to be putting the counters on our own creatures, right? And we can, again, depending on the cards we have, if we don't have our Nils or our Generous Patron, maybe now we want to start putting the counters on our own creatures. If we have our Incubation Druid in play, we probably want to be putting the counters on it. So now it's going to tap to add 3 mana. I also just put some great creatures in here with like Double Strike, Dritz Do'Urden, and Mirran Crusader. These are just great creatures that we can put counters on that are going to get way, way better. You know, they are going to sort of be the win con a little bit in this deck. I think the win con for this deck is just we're attacking with our creatures. So we will eventually want to be putting the +1/+1 counters on our own creatures, and creatures with Double Strike are great targets for that. Sanctuary Warden, again from New Capenna, is a great fit here as well. 4 white, Angel Soldier 5 5/5 with flying. It enters the battlefield with 2 shield counters on it. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker you control. If you do, draw a card and create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So now we can put the +1/+1 counters on our own creatures, and when we attack with our Sanctuary Warden, we can remove a counter to draw a card and create that citizen token, so that's great value. And then again, I just threw in some great creatures here to help us close out the game that we can put counters on, like Archon of Valor's Reach, Dragonlord Jamoka, just really great creatures. They got flying, they're hard to block. We can buff them up with those counters to help close out the game. I threw Inspiring Call in here as well, 2 and a green instant. Draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. So I did do a little bit of a +1/+1 counter theme, but again, depending on the cards we have is going to depend on the direction we go with our commander's ability. There's also the card draw ability here, and I did throw in Black Vice and Wolf Caller's Howl if we want our opponents to be drawing cards. And you know, a lot of people want to be drawing cards in the game already, so it's usually not that difficult to keep your opponent's hands full. We can make them draw a card if we want to make sure their hand stays full. Black Vice is going to deal them damage equal to the number of cards in their hand -4, so making them draw a card can actually be a benefit there. Wolf Caller's Howl is a great one, 3 and a green enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, create X 2/2 green wolf creature tokens, where X is the number of your opponents with 4 more cards in hand. This can be a card that you can just throw in any deck, and at the beginning of your upkeep, all of your opponents have 4 more cards in hand, which is very likely, and you get 3 2/2 green wolf creature tokens. It's actually a really good card. I just thought it was a good fit no matter what. Even if our opponents aren't drawing off of our commander's ability, we might still be cranking out tokens with this. And I also threw in Joel Riel in here because we're going to probably be drawing a card on our turn a lot. And whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 green cat creature token. So that's going to be a benefit for us if we're drawing, right? Because obviously we're going to draw our first card on our draw step, and then on our end step, we're going to draw another card, and this is going to trigger. Also has 4 green until end of turn. Creatures you control have base power and toughness XX, where X is the number of cards in your hand, and that could also be a nice win con for us in this deck. I haven't talked about the treasure token thing yet, and I think that we will most likely be doing that one to our opponents almost exclusively. The way I built this deck is I was thinking, okay, we're almost assuredly going to be giving the treasure tokens to our opponents. We're never going to be giving them to ourselves. I don't think you need to in a green deck, right? You can, but for me, I built this deck around we're going to be giving to our opponents because I thought that was the best option to be giving to our opponents. So I got Viridian Revel and Magnetic Mine in here. Viridian Revel, every time they sack those treasure tokens now, we're going to get the draw card. That's amazing, right? Magnetic Mine is going to make them pay for using those treasure tokens. Of course, they don't have to, but now we're nullifying the bonus that we're giving them. If they don't use them at all, great, that's fine too. With Magnetic Mine, every time they sack one of those treasure tokens, it's going to be dealing 2 damage to them. And I also threw in Eye of Singularity, and this is probably the best bet for something like this. Again, I'm relying on us not getting the treasure tokens to ourselves, so this is going to blow up those treasure tokens, right? 3 and a white world enchantment. When Eye of Singularity enters the battlefield, destroy each permanent with the same name as another permanent, except for basic lands. They can't be regenerated. So if we already have a bunch of treasure tokens in play, this will blow them all up. Also though, whenever a permanent other than a basic land enters the battlefield, destroy all other permanents with that name. They can't be regenerated. And we are creating 2 treasure tokens with our commander's ability, right? We're going to give 2 treasure tokens to somebody, and they're going to see each other enter the battlefield, right? So all this happens if Eye of Singularity is in play, is those 2 treasure tokens that go into play under that player's control are automatically going to get destroyed as soon as they enter the battlefield. And then if we happen to have a Viridian Revel in play, we're going to get to draw cards off of them because they are artifacts going to the graveyard. Or if we have that Magnetic Mine, they're going to be taking a bunch of damage from it, right? That's a pretty sweet combo there, I think. I also noticed that our commander is a flying 05, which is pretty interesting. So I put Slaughter the Strong in here and Fell the Mighty as board wipes. Both are going to be great fits. Obviously, Slaughter the Strong, 1 white sorcery. Each player chooses any number of creatures they control with total power 4 or less, then sacrifices all other creatures. So if our commander has a 0 power, it's just a free include, right? We can just include it on top of whatever other creatures we can grab. Fell the Mighty, though, is the best bet here. 4 and a white sorcery. Destroy all creatures with power greater than target creature's power. So we choose our commander and basically destroy every other creature in play unless unless it has a 0 power, right? I also thought, again, E Honda Sumo Champion was a great fit here. This is the second deck I've included this guy in. He does have a very unique and interesting ability. 4 white human warrior, 0/7. As long as it's your turn, each creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. And our commander is now going to be a flying 5/5. That's pretty formidable, right? In fact, if we can use our commander's own ability and put a couple of counters on it, now it's a flying 2/7, so it's going to deal 7 damage. That's only 3 hits until a kill. Pretty darn good. Also, whenever E Honda Sumo Champion attacks, up to 100 target creatures each get +0/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. And again, if we got a full grip, now our commander is an 0/12, and it's going to be dealing 12 damage. That's only 2 hits. This guy is really good in this deck, I think. We can actually sort of turn this into a Voltron deck. I also have Assault Formation for the same reason, right? Again, I really like that our commander is a flying 0/5, and Assault Formation will allow us to deal damage equal to toughness rather than power. And so now, again, our commander becomes a flying 5/5. That's pretty darn good. So I thought throwing a few of those effects and taking advantage of the fact that our commander is an 0/5 was really poignant. Again, it depends on the cards you have, right? You are really going to have to change your strategy depending on the cards you have in play. This isn't going to be the easiest deck in the world to play. You do have some non-bows here if you're not careful, but that is all. That is Gluntch the Bestower, and really interesting commander. Man, I probably would tackle this myself. I already have 2 Selesnya decks, so I don't know. Not sure if I want another one, but there's just a lot of really interesting things going on here. And again, depending on the cards you have in play or maybe in your hand is going to depend on which one you choose there, right? Whether or not you have that Viridian Revel, whether or not you have that Nils Discipline Enforcer. It's really going to depend on which one you choose and for who. And obviously it's going to depend on what your opponents have in play, right? If your opponent has no creatures in play, it's going to be really easy to pick them to put the +1/+1 counters on a creature. And if you have an opponent that's mana screwed, you can be a nice guy and give them those treasure tokens, right? So you can also do that as well. I really think this is a super fun commander in a casual commander game. And if you're interested in it, I have the deck list in the description below. Feel free to check it out. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.